Hello and welcome back to the Chance Cube, where Set 5 has finally hit the ground running. The pre-release event is out of the way. You've all opened the vast majority of your packs, unless, of course, you've got a box coming in the post like me. Either way, the Force is here, and we've all had a chance to play with it at pre-release, and now we're going to put it into practice with our constructed decks. There's big events coming up in the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, and we've all had a chance to play with a lot of these decks, I think, online with some simulators, but now it hits the cardboard, and now is the time to start getting ready for some of the big events that are coming up. Maybe you've got a showdown, maybe you've got an early PQ or something like that, and we are going to go through some of the best lists that we think are going to work. We're going to sort of do a few meta predictions and work out what's going to be good. Got a few lists that we've come up with ourselves, a few lists that we've found online that we want to sort of have a look at and dissect, and we are going to go from there. And so, Patrick, what an exciting time now that we can finally sink our teeth into these new cards, and they're all that we've got them in our hands instead of just looking at pictures of them on Carabast.
Oh yeah, I think this is the most exciting time. The first couple of weeks of a new set. We've done the pre-release. We've opened some packs. We're going to look at what we've got. Are we going to adjust decks that we've played before? Are we going to just start off with something completely new? I think I know what I'm going to do. I think you're starting with something completely new. Probably.
Right. Yeah. I'm still very uncertain what to commit to, but I definitely want to test something that is new. And very sadly, I may not be able to play the deck that I played in set 4. And there's kind of a sad goodbye that I possibly need to say for two reasons, all to do with the same person. Because some of you may have spotted recently that actor Kenneth Colley, who played Admiral Piet in Empire Strikes Back and in Return of the Jedi, very sadly passed away recently. And I have to say, I've gone on this super weird personal journey with Admiral Piet, which is probably going to sound like I'm overselling this, but anybody who's been around me for the past 2 or 3 months will know that this hit hard, because he just became overnight like my favorite Star Wars character, because I just enjoyed playing him as a leader. And I rewatched Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi with my children, and just kind of came away feeling like, you know what, the way he plays this character is great, because he's like the only Imperial character who's not a total doofus, and he has this sense of competency that Vader trusts. And it could have been really easy to sort of play some of these Imperial characters like a bit pastiche, as I think some people would say some of them did. But he just had a fantastic way of playing that character, and he just sort of became, just overnight, like I said, one of my favorite Star Wars characters. He famously played Jesus in Life of Brian as well, so I started calling him Admiral Jesus whenever I deployed him and everything like that. And so, yeah, it's very, very sad news. But of course, there's been a lot of outpouring of sort of, of joy of what he brought to Star Wars. He wasn't on screen for very long, but the moments he was on screen were, of course, always very memorable. So thoughts with his family, and of course, a big thank you from the Star Wars community to the great Admiral Piet. So, yeah, I thought we'd start with that.
Yeah.
Apart from that, though, we've got loads of other things to talk about that are brand new and exciting. And although actually I realise now, as we put on the screen, for those of you watching on YouTube, it's Han Solo Green in this fantastic new Force shell. I say it's brand new for a lot of us. Patrick, you actually know this Han Solo leader very, very well, because he's one of your sort of original sort of OG loves, isn't he?
Yeah, I think. So I think I mentioned in the first episode, I played a lot of blue-green villainy, but actually when Han 2 came out, this was Han 2 Red. I played a lot. This was the main deck for a lot of the sort of smaller events we did. It was just like a super aggressive, super low to the ground. Played an ECL version for a bit, but I think the red version caught people off guard a little bit more. I was really, really enjoying Han. And then people discovered Tarkin Town, and he was unplayable. So I went back to playing blue-green villainy at that point. But no, I think we kind of are in this place now in the meta where the Tarkin Town decks have gone out a little bit. They've been checked. I think they're still being played to a very high level. They're still seeing play at top tables, but Han has just enough pieces and enough sort of strong units and enough synergy to kind of push through the Tarkin Town, which really, the payoff for it is that you get this one removal on your base. But actually, because Han can play such massive units and so tempo orientated, the 25 health that you're at Tarkin Town is probably a bit of a hindrance, I think, which is why I think we saw Han 2 go massively up recently with both the green version and the blue version. No one's tried the double red. Maybe I'll have another look at it, but I don't think I will, to be honest. I think if I was going to be playing Han, it would have to be green or blue. I think the Force synergies in particular are very, very powerful at this point. I think a great deck. I think you either stick with the Data Vault or you go to the Jedi Temple. I think we've got a Jedi Temple version up here, which uses a lot of the Jedi synergies. I think this will be a fun one to try. You've still got your home one at the top end. You've still got your Rebellious Hammerhead, which is great. Mace Windu looks like an absolute bomb in this deck. I mean, if you can play this a turn early, it looks super duper powerful. Same with Yoda. I think Yoda with Han Solo looks amazing. You've got the Sentinel with Obi-Wan Kenobi. You've got Ki-Adi-Mundi. I think this deck looks fantastic. And of course, it can play the very powerful Force Throw.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And I think you got the horrible turn one play once of Gung-Chi and Force Throw. So.
I was playing it on Carabas with our friend Josh, and turn one he played the Gung-Chi, and then I played something, and then I was expecting him to claim, and then my turn one unit just disappeared, and I was like, "What happened there?" And he was like, "You didn't notice, did you?" And I was like, "No." And it was like, "Yeah, he'd obviously been able to do the Force Throw on turn one," which is just. It's so good. It's so good. And of course, that's why we're starting here, because this is the deck that everyone's talking about. This is like the most upvoted deck on Star Wars Unlimited database. There's loads of people playing this. Han Green was already being played a lot anyway, as you said. And then the thing is, a lot of it has changed because a lot of people are leaning into this Force synergy. But I think for me, actually the best part of this deck that makes this deck so good is that new Grogu, because whenever you play any card game, you are always jumping through hoops. You can do this thing, but only if you do that. And of course, the best decks and the best players will find some way to offset that negative that gives you that positive. So you put 2 damage on something to play early, but then you basically just use Grogu to turn that into a removal sometimes, which is just crazy. And so, I mean, I was going to ask you where you felt was the way to land with Han Green, whether it's Data Vault or Force. But arguably, if you're treating it in a silo and you're trying to say which one is the best way to deploy Han Solo as a leader, that Grogu, and then of course the synergy with all the other Force units as well, because you can get him in for free if you stuck a General's Blade on someone and attack with it. That ability to transfer the downside of his leader ability into removal is arguably so much better than 60 cards and extra health, right?
I think also it's quite telling that this is a deck that runs the 2 cards that FFG have said are on their watch list at the moment, General's Blade and Force Throw. I think if you can find a deck that combines these 2 cards, that obviously the game designers are like, we accept this as these 2 cards are very, very powerful. And like you said, the payoff from General's Blade, if you get that Grogu for free, it's backbreaking, really. It can be in this deck, because the downside of Han is the 2 damage. And like you said with Grogu, it's completely mitigated.
And in many ways, the times I've played against it, the Grogu really makes me make different decisions, because I'm like, I need to make sure that I don't put this unit in range of being Grogu'd. I need to make sure that I don't give Grogu a way of taking some damage off my guy. I was playing a lot of Piet Red, as I mentioned, and I want to send the laser tech in and ramp, but now I'm like, actually, I don't want to put 2 damage on Grogu, because it's then gonna go somewhere else and possibly defeat something I'm trying to sort of develop elsewhere. And so it not only it effectively can keep you in check if it's on the other side of the board, because you have to kind of play around it, and then sometimes if you're playing around it, that's why you lost, because you didn't get value out of your own cards. So it is super, super good. And, of course, the other cool thing that it got is Ki-Adi-Mundi makes your Rebellious Hammerhead better. It makes your Force Throw better too, because you can afford to Force Throw yourself now with choices. You go, well, I've got 2 home ones in my hand because I drew 2 off my Ki-Adi-Mundi, so now my Force Throw is just guaranteed killing that thing, rather than giving my opportunity to discard a salvage and do no damage to something. So there's just so many things that synergize super well with this that... It's just, it's hard to look past this. Although I suppose when I say hard to look past this, I guess I should say the color combination. Because I think what's interesting is that the color combination does also work with Anakin as well. And we talked about General's Blade and flipping heck. I mean, if you've been hit by double General's Blade on an Anakin on Carabast within the first few weeks, I feel for you, because it's very painful. And so I've put that list on the screen as well. And obviously, it's slightly different, but not by much. It's got a few things with bigger butts, so I can't remember its name, but it's that 2/6 3-drop that, you know, effectively you can just sit that there, and it can probably 2 for 1 using the leader ability. You know, obviously some of these things can punch up. Be intriguing to see how these two lists would interact with each other in a game. But yeah, what's your views on, you know, would you play Anakin or Han, do you think? There's obviously they're different leaders.
Yeah,
so
I think my internal bias is that I've never actually been massively impressed with Anakin. I think he's quite a if you play into Anakin a lot, there is a way of playing around him. You know, there is a way of not putting damage on the base, not giving Anakin this massive body on the deploy until you've got a way of removing him. So personally, I think I would still be steering towards Han Solo. I think the ability to play ahead of curve is going to become very, very important in these decks and in this meta. You know, the one thing you can't Anakin, you can't force throw turn 1 Gung-Chi. I think that's something that's quite powerful. I think Anakin is obviously on the deploy a more powerful leader. I think he's slightly more linear, probably a little bit easier to play around. And I think if you're looking at red-green mid-range rather than full aggro, I think I would be personally looking at Han Solo maybe before I looked at Anakin at this moment in time.
I mean, it's obviously list dependent, and the one we've got on the screen, we should just say, is by Timmy Thomas, who's a user on Swudba, or Star Wars Unlimited database. They don't have Grogu in the list, and that's not to say that that's the right way to do it or the wrong way to do it, but without wanting to bang the Grogu drum, you know, the Anakin deck doesn't... It has the Force Throw, but you're right, it's going to get less value out of it in a world where it can't do it turn 1, and it's not going to be able to just have this residual extra removal based around shipping, effectively healing their characters. Anakin's way of buffing something up to remove it is to damage its own base, which in a game against, you know, it's not quite a mirror, but it would be a mirror of colors with a different leader. I think that would still advantage the Han player, who's probably going to play Crate Dragons and can kind of, doesn't mind if we get to the late game, you know, because you just drop a Crate Dragon and then it's kind of hard to out it, I suppose. I
think also with Anakin, I think also with Anakin, you talk about damaging base, 28 health compared to, you know, with Anakin, you kind of do want those bases to have the higher health pool, so Anakin can have a potentially bigger deploy. So I think, I don't know, I think I'm fully prepared to get beaten by this, but Anakin is always a deck that, you know, personally, I think playing blue-green villainy, I've been happy to face on the other side of the table.
Yeah, because blue-green villainy can play around Anakin so well, because chances are you haven't damaged the base that much, so that there's no point in deploying him on 6. So then that buys you the time as the green-blue villainy player to go, well, I don't actually need to be scared of the flip turn. The flip turn might well happen later in the game when I've outed all of his stuff and I just play an Avenger, or, you know, I play Power of the Dark Side. And so that matchup still feels kind of good. And we are actually going to talk about where green-blue villainy actually is, because there's going to be a lot of people out there that probably are feeling a little bit overwhelmed by how much the meta has already shifted, or I suppose it technically hasn't shifted in cardboard yet. It's definitely shifted digitally, but it's going to shift in cardboard. I think we're fairly confident on that, because there's so many powerful new cards from the new set that are commons and uncommons, and there's so much Force synergy. Now, it can sometimes, when that happens in a game, be easy to be like, oh, you know, if we can't beat them, join them. Green, blue, black is probably the best color pairing to kind of basically deal with the fact that Force is a thing. And we're going to talk about red-blue heroism in a second as well, because that's another strong Force chain engine that does look very good. But yeah, little sort of spoiler alert, green, blue, black actually would probably quite fancy this deck, and might even fancy the Han one as well. So yeah, keep that in your mind as we go through some of these new lists. If you're looking at them being like, oh man, I don't have any of those cards, I feel so overwhelmed, I've got to be honest, if you've got a Kira deck, just change like 3 cards and you'll be fine, is what I think. But we're going to come on to that. Let's look at red blue heroism then, and it's Han again. And to be fair, you could play Anakin as well. You could play Yoda. We've got Thork's list on the screen. Han 2 blue. You know, it's obviously running similar red cards. This one's got the Grogu, but we've got things like Chirrut, and we've got Itinerant Warrior, the Jedi lightsaber, Luke's, of course, famously one of the best cards in the game. A Chewie, a couple of Anakins, the new one. Shatterpoint is brilliant as well. Strong looking deck, to be fair.
Ogdo Bogdo.
Oh, and Dr. Bogdo, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was playing Han, I would be looking at blue first. I think I really like blue removal. I think hard removal is what I like in the game. It kind of allows you to be, you just got the answers. It allows you to hold the answers in your hand for your opponent's stuff. So I think having that removal in hand, having the shatter point, having a Luke who can come down, you've basically got another version of Luke, slightly weaker because you're not playing the villainy cards, but you've got Anakin. So you've got Anakin, Luke, you've got Windu, you've got shatter point. All these cards that can come down do a lot of damage. To kind of remove your opponent's stuff. You can play Chirrut. I think we've decided Chirrut is very, very powerful.
He was so good at sealed.
Yeah, any deck that can kind of run Chirrut has to, you have to question yourself why you're not playing Chirrut. It can again still do the force throw stuff. So yeah, I think I like the look of this deck quite a lot. I think the Itinerant Warrior is an amazing addition. You still got that top end of Luke and Crate, so you're going to be winning games with those cards there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I miss Ogda Bogda. I mean, it's you find a way to take the disadvantage of your card and play it to your advantage, because it can't attack unless it's damaged, and of course, you play it with Han, it's going to be damaged. So that makes it, I believe, a 5/3 on. Yeah. Can you play it on that on turn 1? Is it a 3-drop?
It's a 3-drop, so you can play it on turn 1.
I mean, see, that's disgusting in a good way.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
And what happens? Yeah, you've basically turned your mid-range soft control deck into a hard aggro deck. If you're playing Ogdo Bogdo turn 1, there aren't many decks that can answer that cleanly.
And you could even use it as a control piece, to be honest, because you are seeing right now a lot of power creep in the health of units. We're seeing 2 4s, we're seeing 2 5s as turn 1 plays. And if you're up against a deck that you know is more aggressive than you and you're playing this list, you now can trade with it without dying. Well, you're probably going to die, but they die as well. And so anything that can hit for more is important.
If it's a 2/5 and you're thinking, great, this is perfect. Ogdo Bogdo lives as a 5/1.
That is very true. And then you play Grogu, and then you can start healing him up.
Exactly. You don't want to heal him up too much, though. Ogdo Bogdo needs a bit of pain.
Yeah, that's true. Him and Dr. Pershing would get on, I think. Well, maybe he should go in Kira. I'm going to damage a friendly unit. Oh, I think I'll pick Ogdo Bogdo.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Poke him with a stick. So yeah, it does look very good. People have talked about possibly playing this with Yoda, and then of course you play the red base, or you could play Anakin as we mentioned as well. And Anakin Blue is an existing archetype that's been around for a while, has performed well, I suppose. The ability to kind of ramp into this stuff. I mean, it's the same discussion as Anakin Green versus Han Green, I suppose. But I suppose we haven't really talked about Yoda. So thoughts on that one?
I think Yoda's a little bit different. There is a lot of top deck, well, not a lot. There's a decent amount of top deck manipulation. I think I've seen a few running the new Ray unit. That yes. Second turn, second card you drew. I think that's powerful. You've obviously got Kaiden Windu. You've got the ability to kind of look at the top card of your deck. So I think the Yoda one will probably be closer to the control in the soft control than the mid-range. If we're looking at on the scale of aggro to control, I think it is more in this end than it is in the middle, which means I probably will quite enjoy it. But yeah, I think Yoda's deploy is always excellent as well. I think it's very impactful for the board. He's a great unit, normally removes something. And you can basically play a very similar list, maybe just with a little bit of deck manipulation in there.
Yeah, you maybe play some C-3POs or something that just basically guarantees that you find Rey or whatever, So yeah, you're right. It would be slightly different, and I think it's going to be pretty good. But will it be as well played as Han? Probably not, in terms of just that sheer numbers. I suppose there's 2 questions that I guess are going on in people's minds: is what people are going to be playing lots of, and what is actually good, and what is good against what people are going to play lots of. I think is probably what's on people's mind, and that does actually segue us quite nicely into your favorite color pairing, and possibly soon to be my favorite color pairing as well, because I might genuinely be just copying you this set and playing Kira after all this time, because we have been talking about this for quite a while as the testing's been going on with set 5. We feel like Kira is actually still just a great deck. It's very consistent, and it effectively just doesn't really care that you have the Force, because, that thing is dead now. That thing is dead now. And yeah, obviously there's lots of nuances here because there's different ways you could play it. But as our resident initial original Kira player, because in 2 weeks' time, that could also be me, by the way. I'm going to defer to you on how you feel Kira is placed right now. Are you excited to test her in set 5?
Oh, I'm super excited. I mean, the deck list that's up, if you can't see, it's the deck list that I took to the PTQ recently. And it's a pretty standard Kira list. You know, you've got ramp, you've got removal, you've got a few sentinels to try and hold the ground down. And then, yeah, you've got a very powerful top end. You've got all the big spaceships, you've got Vader, you've got more, you've got Reinforcement Walker, which is just this uncommon that's stuck around since set 1 and is amazing. And you've got a very, very good sideboard, which can flex into a lot of pieces. So I really like it. I think there's a question in this upcoming set of what is the base? Is it, do you stick with Data Vault or do you swap to Energy Conversion Lab? Because obviously the big bad of this set is the new Vader. Okay, coming down on 6, putting a shield on something, has removal. Its the most powerful thing you can do with this Vader is give it ambush. So you can basically 2 for 1 on that card. ECL, you can give it ambush. I think if you're playing Data Vault, I've played a lot of Karabas with the Data Vault version and Vader, and I've got to admit, Vader kind of something clogs up your hand because you think I want to play it, but
you need Timely, and you're like, I haven't got it right now,
and I haven't got Timely, and Timely is another thing where you just think, well, if I'm playing Vader, I have to put the Timelies in there, and it's just it warps the deck, I think, a little bit to play it in the Data Vault. I'm gonna be honest, I haven't played a massive amount of the ECL version. It is on the itinerary. It's definitely something I'm going to be throwing together. I mean, you're definitely looking at a slightly different deck list. We're looking at Lone Pikes, we're looking at Gideons, we're looking at the new Vader. Obviously, there's a lot of other cards that are very good with ECL as well. I think that's why Gideon's in there. Gideon, I played a lot with Data Vault as well, and I just found at the moment it's a little bit slow. Obviously, giving it ambush again, it's going to make something big, take something out because it has a nice body. So I think, yeah, you just have to make a few deck building changes to play the ECL version. But I think that's where the new Vader is going to shine, is in that ECL version. I think putting it in Data Vault kind of means changing the core of the deck maybe slightly too much. And I don't know if I love that at this moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing is with the Data Vault list, it is 60 cards, but actually building a Kira list is really hard. I mean, when there's a massive disparity between. I mean, Kira's had a fantastic set 4. You know, it was a very consistent deck that did very, very well in loads of different metas, top level, local level. Because it's just a consistent deck. It doesn't really care what you're playing. It's one of the best decks for avoiding banana skins at a PQ, effectively, because unless you face Piet Red, which, you know, we could do a whole episode on that. It's like one weakness.
And Vader Yellow, I want to say, I think Vader Yellow is another matchup that it struggles with. But as we're going to come on to, I think another new card really does help that matchup a lot, which is the
Supremacy
tie. Supremacy tie with Sentinel and Space 3/3 for 3.
So it gets better even there.
Even then, yeah. I think that's another card that definitely does help out Kira. So that's probably not gonna lie, probably the only card I'm going to be looking to make space for originally if I'm sticking with the Data Vault list.
And that's just what I find so fascinating is we feel like we need to find space in a deck that's 60 cards. And I suppose, I mean, that's not unheard of, I suppose, in a game where you've got a soft control deck. You know, your soft control deck needs to be tailored to the meta, so you need to make sure you get it right. It needs to be right for what you know you're going to play based on, you know, how well you know your own meta and things like that. And so, yes, I agree with you. I think the Vader's too much of it's too an expensive package because he's taking up at least 6 cards in this, and it's just not enough for that. And I think that that extra health for me, I mean, I've not played much of Kira Data Vault yet, but it's the one I've tested most this set, and what I'm enjoying about it is I think that it in a meta where there are more bases that are below 30 health because everyone is like getting. When I say greedy with the Force, I'm not being salty about people playing with it. I mean, like, people are going, this Force synergy is great. Oh, I don't mind going for a smaller base. You know, Data Vault was massive in set 4, and Kira was still able to do well enough to stabilize against an opposing Data Vault list and still be able to then smack back really tall with the big spaceships and finish the game off after it stabilized. And I actually think that if everyone's going, oh, I'm going for a 28 health base now, there's going to be less Data Vaults out there. And I think that's great for Kira Data Vault because it basically just means, on average, she's having having to probably spend maybe one, maybe two fewer turns stabilizing before she can start going, actually, do you know what? I can just hit your base for 10 now, and I don't care that you were ahead for the game because I'm just going to flip the pressure on you now.
And it reduces the clock by at least a turn. There's probably someone out there who can run the numbers, but I think a lot of the time, especially against the 25 health bases, Tarkin Town, I faced Tarkin Town a few times up in Cheltenham, and it didn't really bother me. That 25 health, as soon as you get to a Devastate, as soon as you get to a Avenger, as soon as you get to a Relentless, even a Maul, Vader, these things here where you're just putting bodies out. Devastating Gunship with a couple of damage on it is taking a fifth of your life total in a swing. So I think that's really, 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 I think it's really, really solid. I think the only other card I'm looking at is Craving Power. I think this Kira is going to be an amazing Craving Power leader. Just being able to be devastating, overwhelming barrage, copy 4 and 5 maybe.
Yeah. It's basically the same thing, isn't it? Yeah, and I think
it's a little bit different. You take out one thing very, very big, but the buff sticks around. So
that's true.
I think Kira, if you flip her, she's effectively a 4/4. Play Craving Power, she's a 6/6 effectively at that point, doing 6 damage to one thing. So you can't. It's not as good into something like Sabine. It's not as good into something like Vader. But if we're going to be seeing more of these mid-range decks, just being able to one-shot something that has a lot of health, I think is going to be equally as useful.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see Overwhelming Barrage, Craving Power be, how many of those are you running? I think 5 is probably the right
3
number.
of one, 2 of the other is probably the way to do it. And I just think that this deck is so ready to prey on those mid-range Force decks because the Force chain is really powerful if you can get it going. But with Power of the Dark Side and other bits of removal, it's like, well, they'll spend the Force on doing something like maybe like draw some cards with Ki-Adi-Mundi, and then you kill Ki-Adi-Mundi and he never got to attack, and then they've lost the Force. And then once they lose the Force chain, everything in their hand becomes less impactful, and it just comes down to no effect, or it attacks to no effect, or whatever it is. And I just think that that's going to mean a lot, especially, and I think that means that they're going to miss the extra health. I mean, if you consider the difference between Data Vault and a 28 health base is 5, that's just one attack from a Devastating Gunship if you've got the right amount of damage on it. So it's very, very simple for this deck to turn it around nice and quick. So I'm looking forward to continue testing with this because I just think it seems still well placed. In fact, arguably, possibly even better placed than it was in the previous set is the way I feel about it.
Yeah, I think the one thing we've got to look at when we look at the meta of where Kira is placed is also where Sabine is placed. Now, I know it sounds a bit weird, but that is because we play into Sabine pretty nicely. I think Sabine's a pretty good matchup for Kira. But if Sabine isn't in there, then people come out the woodwork with these Palpatine decks. And I think Kira struggles more into a deck that can go more control-y, if that makes sense. So I think there's still going to be this rock, paper, scissors that we love. All right.
But it's a fair point. She does struggle into other green, black, blues. Like Krennic has the restore like staple to him, so he's healing faster and he has a similar shell, and his units hit harder probably because he's basically giving grit to everything. And then you're right, Palpatine as well, also a problem because you have a lot of grit units in the Kira deck, and you are effectively bringing them into play like literally ready-made for Palpatine to be like, yeah, that's mine now. So but those two versions of green, black, blue haven't been that prevalent because Vader yellow and Sabine have always been prevalent. So that is a good point. We should watch out for that. But we have mentioned that green, black, blue has multiple different ways we could play it, and you have talked about the Kira version of ECL. But you have been working on something that you quite like the look of, which is actually Gar Saxon ECL. Now a lot of people wanted to play this with yellow, but we've already kind of talked about the benefits of playing some of these units with ECL. So talk us through your thoughts on Gar Saxon ECL for Legends of the Force.
Gar Saxon yellow is known really as the shield deck, isn't it? You play all the shielded units. They get +1 power, and more power means quicker games because you win. So we're taking a similar shell here where we're going, well, what are the ambush units that really get paid off for, because shielding an ambush is massive because you can stack a lot of the time how those triggers come down. So if your unit is going to survive the ambush, you can ambush first and then put the shield on the unit. Okay. Obviously, at that point, it doesn't have the power buff from Gar, so you have to make sure you've done the math right that you are going to take out the unit and live. But that is something that's very powerful. This is basically a mono blue deck with a few green powerful cards. And I was just thinking, Vader is the most powerful. If we think Vader is the most powerful card in this set, what is the way that we can maximize that? And I think this is a really nice shell. I think Gar Saxon makes him more powerful. The ambush from ECL and timely means that you get to do it straight away. All right. And then, yeah, you've got just more shielded units. You've got a little bit of removal. I've kind of stuck the removal to the overwhelming barrage, the craving power, and the no glories. But the units are the removal when you have all these ways of ambushing in. You also got Anakin as well, which I think is another really good ECL target. I'm interested to put this down and see what happens.
Yeah, it does look super cool. I mean, the Anakin one was one that stood out to me as well because, again, he's one of the most powerful cards in the set. And some people go, okay, he's probably best in either the deck where he's the leader and it's like he's a heroism leader and he can play the villainy ones. But actually, we've tested that. We don't really like it that much. He's also quite good in Chancellor Palpatine yellow, I think it is. But again, that deck is just way too much of a gigabrain for me to go anywhere near. So how can you... In a world where you're only ever -3/-3ing something because you don't have both conditions met, how do you maximize them? And ECL is great because you -3/-3 something and then hit it for 5, and then you probably take maybe like 1 or 2 damage, so you don't actually take that much damage from him. So ECL is great.
You just 2 for 1 something. You -3/-3 something that's dead. You kill that one off and then ambush into a different unit. So you're still getting a 2 for 1.
Yeah, it's fantastic value.
Because he's got a big, he's a big unit. He can probably survive whatever he's ambushing into a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I think I'm gonna be sleeving this up, spoiler alert, at some point, and we're gonna be trying this one out.
Yeah, anyone in the local store who's listening to this is gonna be like, right, I'm gonna have to tech for this week then. So a couple of other things that stand out in it in the list as well. Covering the wing, I love that inclusion as well because that means you can give those shield tokens to units that don't already have them,
or give it back.
Or give it back, yeah, true. Long Pike, obviously, is also another good ECL target, as you mentioned earlier on. Charleston also feels super good here because, some versions of Gar Saxon Yellow run so many yellow units that sometimes, like, Charleston's not going to be as, like, stacked as we want him to be. But in this, like you said, your shell just happens to be very blue-oriented, so you can get away with that. And then, of course, he's one bigger as well because he will have at least 1 experience on him. So 1 blue card in hand is the first blue card is worth 2 extra power and health. Iden as well is very good. Darth Tyrannus as well is ambush unit anyway with a shield, so he comes in, hits for 5, takes no damage, and of course you don't have to spend ECL on him.
Yeah, probably not an ambush unit. I'm going to stress just as a little FYI because we're probably never having the Force.
That's true. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Actually,
so that was the one. That's why he's only a 2. I think in a lot of the Force decks, if you're playing villainy, you probably are going to be running 3 because this card is busted if you have the Force. If you don't have the Force, he's still very, very good. And I think Gar Saxon, if you don't have the Force, is probably going to be one of the few places that you see him, simply because he gets that buff from coming in with the shield. And I think obviously we've got the other massive addition to Gar Saxon, which you'll be seeing both in the blue and the yellow version, is Axe Wolves. This one that gets bigger the more upgrades are on him. I have managed to him come in with a shield. I've then covered the wing to give it another shield, and then I have craving powered. So,
wow.
Yeah, you win basically in 2 turns with that if you manage to get that off. So yeah, he was massive.
He was,
because craving power on Axe Wolves is basically +3/+2.
Yeah, because you get that extra buff from the leader and the card.
Even the leader, so it's actually +4/+2 if that's the only upgrade.
And it's shielded, so you can't even go, well, it hasn't got that much health in inverted commas. I guess I can out this. So in the words of that famous Chinese bootleg of Star Wars, you made him strong and big. So
yeah, I did. Yeah, I think this will be fun. I don't know it doesn't have the removal that I like in blue-green, in the sense of just cards that remove things. This time the units are kind of the removal, and it'll be very different to Kira. It'll have to play very differently, and I think it will prey upon different decks as well.
Yeah, I think one thing I do like about ECL and Timely together is that you can turn your units into removal. So the very first deck that I played in this game, I played Darth Maul ECL, and it was by no means a strong meta deck, but I came like 96th from 200 people at the national event in October, and I was the highest finishing Maul player that day. I was very happy with, and people kept spending the whole day playing around Force Throw, because they saw my colours and they saw my leader and like they assumed I had Force Throw. But I never actually had it in the list, because a lot of the red Force units that would synergize with Force Throw I didn't really want in the list. I thought Fifth Brother didn't really work. And I had 3 Timelies, I had ECL, and basically I just used my units removal, and my leader had Overwhelm, so basically I'm still hitting your base and killing your stuff, and that felt really good. And so what I think is good about this deck is that you don't have all that removal, but people will see the color pairing and go, oh, I need to play around power, I need to play around this or that, and it's not there. So then they effectively are probably going to play suboptimally, thinking they're playing optimally by playing around the removal that you don't even have in the deck. Although obviously anyone watching this knows you don't have it, but
oh no,
yeah. So we just ruined the whole segment. But I think there's always
now I'm going to put all the removal in.
It's all a bruise, guys. Yeah. But I think playing around with those kind of expectations for decks sometimes is what can do pretty well. And I just in my experience of running an ECL removal deck, it can be a really good way of just removing stuff, and you're doing it with body, so you're filling the board. So I really like this. I'm looking forward to see how this performs, really. So yeah,
I just want to make one mention of the Inquisitor's Lightsaber. I actually think it's going to be a pretty good sideboard piece in this deck as well. I haven't sorted the sideboard out much, but it's in there just because I think Force is going to be much more prevalent, and it's one of the few lightsabers that doesn't get the bonus only if it's equipped to a Force unit. It gets the bonus regardless. So I think that will be a fun little upgrade.
Yeah, like I mentioned in the pre-release bonus episode that we did, even just sticking that on anything. I had it on Maz Kanata at one point. I had it on Morgan as well. You can basically just babysit their leader and go, if you want to flip, I'll just kill you. And because there's so many 6 health or 7 health Force leaders that you can stick it on a 3-drop or a 4-drop that just is sat there as deterrent, and then they don't flip the leader, and then you win the game in the meantime. So yeah, I agree. I think it's a really, really good card in the way that the meta is right now. Possibly another reason to play Han over Anakin if everybody's got the Inquisitor's lightsaber in their sideboard, because at least it doesn't get the buff against him. So it's a cool meta dependent card. There's always a few. And I do quite like it. So, well, obviously, speaking of ECL, we are going to briefly talk about Sabine and the general kind of aggro format, because the way that things are going with the Force synergy on the ground kind of doesn't look that good for Sabine right now, because she didn't really get many new pieces. And, the list that we're seeing people sort of like try and work through with Sabine online, there's not that many new cards, to be honest, because a lot of that Force synergy she's not going to have access to with ECL. I mean, of course, there were Data Vault variants as well, but so much of the Sabine shell is not Force enough for them to kind of get away with using Force Throw and things like that. And all of a sudden, there is this massive rolling monster on the ground that might actually be better value than Sabine. And so what happens with Sabine now is going to be interesting. Many people are speculating that it's going to drop off. And I mean, as someone who hasn't played Sabine and I've played against it a lot and been crushed by it, I'm quite encouraged by that. So what's your thoughts on this one, Patrick? Do you think there's a future for Sabine?
I think there's a future for Sabine, basically when people forget Sabine exists. And that is where aggro decks really shine, is when people forget that you can just play a 2-drop, a 3-drop, 2 2-drops and win the game that way. And you just kind of play solitaire almost. You don't really care about what your opponent's doing. You're just playing units, and then you, for a cause I believe in, for 4, revealing another 4, a cause I believe in, play it next turn and win the game. Obviously, with Sabine ECL, you're always, well, at least until rotation, you're going to be able to, get out a Wrecker. You're going to be able to put a Dark Saber on Sabine. You're going to have to do all these very, very inherently powerful turns. But you're right. I think looking at Legends of the Force, I mean, this deck list we're looking at here from C. Perez, really, it's added Adi Galea. which is an amazing unit. I don't think we've talked about her yet. A very early Force unit, but she doesn't need the Force to get her payoff. She just kind of punishes your opponent for playing the game. Which in an aggro deck is kind of exactly what you want.
So an additional ping. You can have turns where instead of Sabine hitting your base and her base for 1, she hits your base for 2 and and her own base for 1, because you probably need to play events to deal with Sabine. Open fires, merciless contests, that kind of thing.
100%.
So she is a good addition.
I think she's a good addition, but again, I think until people kind of forget Sabine exists, I think she'll be eaten up. I think if you're looking at red-green heroism, I think Han can be as aggressive as Sabine, but then have a much better late game and also play with at least 3 more health if it's playing the 28 health base.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it does seem to. I think there's just so many things that those decks that we've mentioned that are going to be everywhere that just outvalue on so many different things. So I mean, Kiadi Mundi, I think, is actually one of the most annoying things for Sabine players, because we are going to live in a world now where force throw decks are, like I mentioned it earlier, are happier to force throw their own stuff to guarantee that's dead. And when you give a mid-range deck the ability to have full autonomy over what it removes from an aggro deck, that's when aggro just never gets to look at. I mean, those of you who've played Lorcana, I've played loads of that. That's what's good about Force Throw, to be honest, is that sometimes you have to rely on your opponent deciding how much damage is done. In Lorcana, you don't care about that. You just go, I use my character to do this thing, and that thing's dead now. And aggro has not really had that much of a good time until they've kind of they've had to adjust the game to let aggro come to the table. And the way I see Kiadi Mundi giving these decks the ability to effectively sing songs like characters do in Lorcana. It's like I spend a very little amount of resource to do like 9 damage to this or 8 damage to that. And the second that you start being able to remove an aggro deck's units with insane value, like you spent 1 on that and then you dropped a 4-drop or whatever, how do they come back from that? And then of course the other key piece as well is Chirrut. Chirrut is going to be a nightmare for Sabine decks, because they are going to have to spend 2 characters to get through him, and in that time, like, they've just lost the game because they didn't hit base for 15 in the first couple of turns, and then they, whatever damage did get through, there's healing packages in the Han Green as well. Like Yoda is a massive problem for Sabine decks, because they'll just ramp into it with Han with a resupply and then play it early anyway, and he'll simultaneously heal a bunch of damage and then wipe their whole board possibly. So these other decks got so many things that almost seem like tailor-made to just kill Sabine, which, yeah.
I think it's something to touch on there is the force throw. Okay, a lot of people are being to force throw. It's not broken. It's not broken. You can play around it. Keep the low cost things in your hand. Why force throws become much more prevalent now is exactly that, for reasons like cards like Kiadi Mundi. You add these 2 cards in your hand, which then mean you have no onus in what happens to your unit, because usually you can be like, well, I'll discard this, I'll keep this, salvage. That was a good example. We had this 0 cost card that we would always, sideboard in because it would help us get our big stuff back. And also against, heaven forbid, we got force thrown. Well, it's not going to do 0. It's going to do 0 damage to a unit. Now, if your opponent or the force throw player is managing to draw 2 cards, well, they're just going to discard their own card to guarantee killing it. And that is when force throw becomes very, very powerful. And when you have no say in how much damage is done to your unit.
Yeah, it's just reduced interactivity for you as the opponent, which that is going to hurt. That is really going to hurt. But especially it's going to hurt a deck like Sabine. And what I think may happen actually is that people who like playing Sabine, they could turn around and just become Darth Vader players, right? Because Vader Yellow actually looks pretty good in this meta where you've got everybody is building this massive engine on the ground, and Vader's like, okay, well, thank you for not contesting my arena. I guess I'll just hit you for stupid damage in space, OB as well. And of course, whilst, yes, Kiadi Mundi does allow a force throw deck to be able to, take this onus over what they're doing, Vader runs so many small units that actually force throwing a Vader deck is kind of, if you don't want to lose what's in your hand, if you do get force thrown as a Vader player, you don't care because you just discard a Y-Wing. Or, crucially, and we're going to talk a little bit about this with a couple of the yellow villainy decks, Bazine, I think, is going to do so much work this set because you just play that and they haven't got force throw anymore. So Vader Yellow looks really well positioned, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, this is the deck that Adam, who in our play group, he's kind of mained Vader Yellow. I think Vader Yellow eats into Kira quite handedly at the moment. So it's a very difficult deck because you basically can't play bomb and running out the sideboard. I think that's why we saw a lot more of these red heroism or red villainy decks coming out of the woodwork to try and combat how good Vader is. And you're exactly right. If all the force units are on the ground, what do? You just go, well, I'll let you have it. I'll let you have the ground. I'm going to win you. I'm going to beat you in space, because that Vader flip onto any of these 2-cost, 3-cost spaceships is back-breaking. And you can still play, a decent amount of removal. The Geonos and Patrol, bouncing something back to hand. You play the Shuttle, which captures something. You still play your Waylays, still play, all these Overwhelming Barrage. I mean, the Overwhelming Barrage on Vader, yes, it's not a turn 5 flip, it's the turn 6 flip, but oh no, boo-hoo, still probably doing 11 damage off Overwhelming Barrage.
Well, you could do it off the Clone Combat Squadron without Vader even being there, because you
without even
Vader, so... what I was actually going to ask you is, do you wonder if maybe we see an increase of swoop down in these decks? It might be a sideboard thing, to be fair, but I wonder if we see people main decking that in Vader. Someone actually main decked it against me in the Cheltenham PQ.
Because I got it as well.
Yeah, so it just increases that. It's that extra couple of percent that gives the Vader deck, if it desperately needs to interact with the ground in some way, because there's this rolling force engine, like it can. So I'm sort of wondering if you expect to see that.
100%. I mean, I think a lot of people playing it in the sideboard anyway. I match one in Cheltenham against a Vader Yellow, and let me tell you, I did not expect the main deck swoop down. So you just kind of don't play around it, and then you get swooped and you get beaten.
Yeah, well, so it definitely has the ability to be able to still interact with the ground, which I think is the main thing. And weirdly, possibly those force decks their only real interaction with the ground with the space, I should say. Sorry, is going to be force throw, which, as I said, Bazine can snag. Mace Windu as well, I suppose, is something that could come down. Yoda as well, but are you going to reach Yoda in a game against Vader Yellow? Probably not. You might be able to get to Windu, especially in a Han deck. But I mean, again, there could be a crucial turn where the Vader player just knows they get outed by the Windu, so they play the Bazine, they see it, and then they discard it. So I don't know. I could be wrong. There could be someone listening to this who thinks I'm wrong, but I actually think Vader has better ways of interacting with the ground than some of those force decks do have the ability to be able to interact with space. So let's move on now to another leader that has done pretty well across the course of the game since set 3 in his introduction, and there's the possibility that maybe he is able to come back, and that is, of course, Quinlan Vos with his Tarkin Town deck, because there was actually a lot of new cards that came out this set that actually seemed to be quite fun to possibly test with his sort of archetype of disruption and discard and things like that that we're quite excited by. And there's lots of different, there's kind of more ways you can build Quinlan now, I guess we could say. And we have mentioned before that Quinlan kind of struggled in a Data Vault meta because it didn't quite have the reach to be able to deal with that extra 3 health. And then, of course, decks that were running that were being able to sort of like kind of just control him because he's a bit of a mid-rangey deck. But if we are coming to a meta where there's fewer Data Vault decks, as we mentioned earlier on, there's more Force decks, that 5 health difference, does that invite Quinlan back into the conversation of can he finish games quicker now if there's going to be more Force decks? I mean, it's all dependent on if people actually really lean into those Force decks, but the early indications are going to be that people are going to try. So loads of stuff, I think, to talk about Quinlan, but what's your initial thoughts on him? Do you think it's going to be a better set for him this time than last time around?
I mean, if it's a better set for him, he's doing okay because he was still winning PQs. He was still top 8 a lot of PQs. I think.
True, actually.
So yeah, I mean, if it's a better set, then I'm probably in trouble because I've not played a lot of Quinlan Tarkin Town. I generally steer more towards the villainy decks now, I think, but this looks really, really good. I think the Quinlan unit is very powerful. I think Quinlan unit. Adi Gallia, obviously we've talked about, is really, really powerful, and I think there's a few interaction sort of disruptive cards that I think we both really, really like in the Chance Cube card.
Of course,
because it makes
Tip
you
the scale. That's what it's called.
Tip the scale.
Yeah.
Whatever.
We just called it the Chance Cube.
The Chance Cube, exactly. Discard's non-unit card, another powerful disruptive discard card, and Will of the Force. I think.
Yeah,
it's
big
kind
fan
of
of this.
a card that you very much like.
It's basically exactly the same card as one of my favorite cards in Lorcana, because it's basically, this goes back to your hand and you discard a card at random. And in a deck that runs heavy discard, you time that so that it's when their hand has already been emptied by all of your other discard, which Quinlan does anyway, right? So it basically just becomes flat removal. Like, it's bounce in the best case, in the worst case scenario, and then in the best case scenario, it's basically just like power, or it's Rival's Fall, but it costs you 4, and that to me is super exciting. And because they gave us other discard cards as well, I think that Quinlan decks can be greedy with the discard now, because some of the are staple to bodies, like Jedi in Hiding. It seems great in this deck because, you know, you're going to play it, you're going to ping something, maybe Tarkin Town, whatever, and then if they feel that they have to out it, then they discard a card. I think it's at random as well, so they might not want to kill it because they're like, well, I can't afford to lose my overwhelming barrage. And I think that stuff like that just makes this deck like so much better than it already was before. Like Shin Flurry as well seems very good. It's not a discard disruption card, but it's going to make deploying like Ahsoka awesome, because she'll come down, potentially discard a unit and exhaust something, but you played ambush, so she kills something too, takes less damage, and you just kind of get this like additional. She just becomes like a double whammy. For example, there's also the Jedi Knight, which is a 3-cost 3/3 that when you play, you get to deal 2 damage to an enemy ground unit if you have the initiative. So Quinlan doesn't really like being on the initiative, so actually having this, maybe as a sideboard card to be fair, means that when you are on the play, you can still ping something to death, because you go, I'll tap Quinlan and this at the same time, and that thing with 3 health is just dead now. So it did get a lot of love, and I think that with a lot of there's lots of talk about the Han decks and the Anakin decks with the Force things. I just think that, like, I keep finding more and more cards that I go, that is perfect for Quinlan, and there's so many different variants that we could build with this. And what we've got on the screen right now is a list that's also running the constructed lightsaber, which means for the very first time, drum roll, sound the klaxon, Quinlan has healing available, which is huge when you're looking after a 25, because anyone who's played a 25 health base knows you have to look after it. And Quinlan's way of looking after it was discard and can I win the game with my reach? Whereas now, maybe you can afford to put a constructed lightsaber on Quinlan and just chip away at saving your base, and then maybe that's how it gets its reach, because it just kind of swings the health situation in its favor. So I think it being able to run Restore for basically the first time ever is actually quite a big development for Quinlan.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I just think the Tarkin Town, if Han ends up becoming a bit more prevalent, I think we are going to see more Tarkin Town decks, whether that be Quinlan, whether that be Cad Bane, whether that be Rey. I do think this ability to just finish off an opponent's unit that's already damaged. You haven't had to use Quinlan's ability. You haven't had to use Cad Bane's ability to ping a unit. They've come in damaged. You can just finish it off, and the tempo play from that is very big. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if we do see more of these Tarkin Town decks coming out the woodwork, really.
Yeah, Han 2 being around just invites people to play Tarkin Town, I think. And if I don't play Kira this set because I decide it's not quite working, I think Cad Bane or Quinlan is where I may go to next, because I mean, I like playing disruption. That's mostly the kind of decks I've played in the other card games I've played, and Quinlan and Cad Bane are the closest to that. And without wanting to sort of be repetitive on the subject, Cad Bane also has access to Bazine, which is, like I said, I think is one of the best force throw answers in the game, and she's going to ping something as well because she's an underworld character. So I don't think that I don't think decks that have access to her need to be as worried about force throw as some of the decks that can't interact with that. And maybe Quinlan becomes that too. With Spark of Rebellion, I'll play for 2, your force throw's gone now. And by the way, I'll play my own force throw, or I'll play Tip the Scale and I'll take it out. So people are complaining about force throw, but it's not like they haven't printed answers to it, which I think is important.
I have to agree. I think it's always very important. We don't want to see cards run away with the meta. We kind of saw that at the very beginning of the last meta with Django and all the cards being able to pin. I think we had Triple Dark Raid kind of just proved to be too powerful by itself. So yeah, I think there are answers to force throw.
And it's just about seeing if we can find them. And I think many of these decks have the opportunity to do that, so it's going to be exciting to test them out. That is the last of the deck lists that we have on the screen for those of you watching, and because there's just so many we could do, and if we did them all in one video, we would probably just make no more videos this set. So we need to, of course, keep people waiting for some other stuff. So we're going to just briefly talk about some honourable mentions, and it's funny because we were kind of populating the list of what the honourable mentions might be, and then I wasn't really paying attention to the colours, and then I looked at the screen, and it's just a sea of blue green villainy, which says a lot about me and you, I suppose. But we're very excited about some of these guys, so tell us about some of these.
I think you say blue green villainy. I think Krennic and Thrawn, I think, probably might be blue green. I think Krennic almost definitely will be. I will play Krennic again. Krennic I played a lot in set 1 and a little bit at the beginning of set 2, as I mentioned in episode 1. So I'm definitely excited to see what Krennic can do. I think Thrawn, we've got a package with the Night Sisters, all kind of having this on-death ability when defeated, whether that drawing a card, giving minuses out. I think that's very powerful. Got the Legacy run, which I think will be very powerful in a Thrawn yellow deck. So I think Thrawn will be fun. I think there was a really good Thrawn red deck that was being played at Cheltenham, which I think caught a few people by surprise. I think Thrawn is good. I think he was just a little bit slow in the last meta, and he didn't quite have the number of when defeated cards that can impact the board to a high enough level.
Yeah, it needed consistency, didn't it?
It needed consistency, exactly. Talzin, I think, while she's a blue leader, I personally have been building her with red mainly. I have seen ECL versions. I have seen green force health versions, but I think the red is better. Again, you kind of get the force throw. You do get a bit more of the Night Sister packages. You can play the red removal, the blue removal. So I think Talzin red is probably going to be my first port of call for constructed. And then Palpatine, I think you've probably played a bit more Palpatine than me. I think you were quite keen on Palp Yellow to begin with, weren't you? Is that something we're thinking might be worth it this set?
I really like the look of it's a deck that feels positioned nicely. I think my journey with Palp is really interesting because Palpatine Blue, I think, always used to be what people would see as the superior deck. But when I got into the game, I couldn't afford to go out and buy Devastators and Avengers and Super Laser Blast and things like that. And I had to scrimp and save just to get myself 2 green Devastators for Palp Yellow, which was a much cheaper deck. But as time kind of moved on, I think we saw last set that Palp Yellow was better than Palp Blue for that meta because it could kind of interact in better ways. And if you were going to play blue-green villainy, why do it with a 5-card hand Colossus, effectively, when you could play just play it with Kira, and then you have the full hand, and it's 33 instead of 35, but you don't really care because that difference is not that much. So just Kira was better than Palp Blue, but if you wanted to play Palp, you play yellow. And I played it at the end of set 3. I took it to the store showdown for that, and I managed to make top 4, but my one defeat was to a ground aggro deck, and one of its biggest problems was always Sabine ECL. Palp Yellow always struggles into that. So one of the reasons why I'm excited to possibly bring it back is if we are seeing this Sabine ECL kind of just gets a bit chased out of the meta by some of these, Han and Anakin ground rolling engines that just kind of run over her, I quite like Palp Yellow for a couple of reasons. Once again, Bazine, I don't have to worry about force throw too much because I'm either not playing too many early units anyway because the early set of the deck is really like No Good to Me Dead, Frozen in Carbon, and things like that. I don't have that many units that they're really going for. So if I can at some point in the game just start sniping those force throws, by the time my units come out that could get force thrown, basically, I think I can play around it. Also, Palp draws you so many cards that you're probably going to be able to just discard your other Bazine, or you discard your Salacious Crumb. It runs enough, or perhaps you know what, you don't need to exhaust anything anymore because you've got your OB ready for next turn, or you've got your Devastator ready. So No Good to Me Dead is no good to me in my hand. It can just go in my discard pile. So you have so much ways of drawing answers to it that just kind of get around it. And crucially, I think the other thing as well is that I think Palp Yellow is going to also have the ability to break the force chain quite nicely because I've already mentioned them, but No Good to Me Dead and Frozen in Carbonite are a fantastic way of stopping those decks getting the Force, because they're probably going to have to attack with those units to do it, but they can't attack if you've Frozen in Carbonite, or you've made it so it can't attack this phase. So you can disrupt that engine very nicely with Palp and just stall out till you get to the late game. And the biggest one is if everybody's playing Han Solo set 2, thanks. I'll just take that Crate Dragon then. I think the Palp is really nicely placed for Han Solo, so I think there's a world where he can have a good set, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I think we have to see how. But if the meta is what a lot of people are going to be talking about, which is a lot of these mid-range decks, specifically Han related, Palp has to come out. I think he will prey into those decks very handily.
Yeah, it's going to be great. He's going to remind everybody that he is the Senate after all this time. So yeah, I'm looking very much forward to testing with him. I will go through. I think I'm going to start with Kira, but because I think that Palp is kind of meta dependent. I think if Kira doesn't disappear as much as we want her to, if Sabine doesn't disappear as much as we want her to, then I'm not sure. If Vader Yellow gets like everywhere because everyone who was playing Sabine is now playing Vader, that's kind of also a bit of a problem for Palpatine as well. So it's very meta dependent. But yeah, that's something I'm excited about. There's a couple of decks that I want to try and play for sentimental reasons, and so I would love to still be able to make Piet Red work this set. I think it's still great into Kira, but it really struggles into Force decks. So I will try my hardest. I don't really. There's a lot of people looking out now at this kind of increased synergy with the Invisible Hand, but the more I play it, I think you have to sacrifice a lot of the key pieces that make Piet Red good to be able to fit those droids in. And fine, it's great when you get the Invisible Hand off, but there's only 3 cards in the deck that give you that buff. So if you never see the Invisible Hand, you're just sat there with a bunch of droids you don't care about, and you don't have some of the key pieces you needed. And also, it can't deal with Force right now, because it doesn't really have a way of playing around Force unless you main deck Salvage, and then even then you're just costing yourself space in the deck. So lots of problems with it that need to be ironed out. Maybe I take the set off from Piet Red and we see what happens. And I also would like to try and make a Maul ECL deck work as well, because Force Throw being good, I just think that was my first deck in this game. So I'd love to try and make that work with maybe some IG 2000s and some War Juggernauts. I like the idea of, in a deck built around Overwhelm, ECLing a War Juggernaut while Maul is out. That could be kind of disgusting. But that might be more of a meme thing. So we'll have to see. There's a few things I want to try. But yeah,
it'll probably just end the game though. I'm not gonna lie. ECL War Juggernaut. If it pings 5 things, it's probably ending the game.
Yeah, like I said, if it's out, if it comes out on the Maul flip, it's ECLing with it just gains Overwhelm. So it will go massively tall and it will run over the thing you just damaged. So I mean, it could be a one-trick pony, but I am going to try it at some point. So watch this space for Maul. It probably won't go as well as I hope, but it might have some fun plays. So yeah, anything you want to play for fun outside of all these things that we think are going to be competitively good?
I do want to try some of the new leaders, 100%. I think Avar, I think Obi, Talzin, obviously, we think it's powerful. So I am going to be trying some stuff. Revan, love, nice, yeah. KOTOR, I think the leader is terrible. I'm going to put it out there. However, he's Revan, so
you got to do it.
We're going to do it.
So many people got into Star Wars, not necessarily just because of the movies, but because of the games as well. So he has a place in lots of people's hearts, and that's you included,
100%.
Isn't it?
100%. Yeah, Knights of the Republic is probably the game I have played the most.
Other than Star Wars Unlimited at this point. It's not even close.
I actually don't think I could play Star Wars. I think I could play Star Wars Unlimited until the day I die for 3 hours every Friday at our club, and it won't match the time I play for KOTOR. So,
well, in which case, fingers crossed that Revan becomes mega playable at some point, because that will just make you can die a happy man at that point.
I will.
We'll get it on his tombstone. F's in chat. There we go. That just about wraps it up for today. We've talked through loads of stuff, and there's so many things we can continue to talk about. There's so many leaders that we didn't get a chance to really kind of go through lists for, and of course things are always going to be evolving, always changing. So as the meta evolves and warps and develops around different synergies and different results and things, we'll always keep an eye on those. And so we will, of course, see you next time for more of that analysis. Stay tuned to our YouTube account where we do a little bit of gameplay as well. If you're listening to us on Spotify, don't forget to hit the rated button. If you are watching us on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel. All the admin you're supposed to do with these things, do those things, and then it means you'll never miss some of our content in the future. You have to hit the bell notification as well so that you see that. So just press all the buttons. Just, pretend you're in a pod racer cockpit and just press all the buttons. That's what you got to do. So don't forget to do that. Any last words, Patrick, before we let our listeners move on with their lives?
Oh, just let us know what you're going to play. I love looking through deck lists. It's basically all I do.
Exactly. Well, I tell you what, if we get loads in the comments, we'll go through them next time, and then that gives us a nice starting point. So yeah, excellent invitation there from Patrick. But without further ado, we shall love you and leave you, and may the Force be with you, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.